Welcome back to another episode of The Banker, the Broker, and the Canadian. We have a dual host scenario where Jim and I will talk back and forth a little bit and share some ideas around procrastination. And what are the other two areas you wanted to cover, Jim?
Let me look it up here. I got to refresh my memory as well. The three types of procrastination we're going to start with, how to identify them in your own life. And then if we have time, maybe why self-criticism is one of the reasons that people procrastinate. And the third thing I had on the outline was how to reframe discipline as a powerful tool for achieving your goals.
Okay, beautiful. Well, that's a good outline. We'll touch on each one, but let's start with what you first mentioned. So, what are the three types of procrastination?
Well, great question, and happy Wednesday to everybody that's listening. I hope that you're off to a good start. You've done your grateful threes and thought about three things that you're grateful for today. I was reading in the magazine Psychology Today about procrastination, and they outlined three major types of procrastinators. And number one was the perfectionist. And this is the person that needs an A plus on every single paper. You probably know a handful of people like that in your life. And maybe maybe you're a perfectionist and you want to do everything perfectly. So that's one type that Psychology Today put down in their article. And the
Not me.
second one was,
I don't fall in that category, Jim.
oh, you don't.
Mm-mm. Oh no. I have certain peculiarities. I have certain little pet peeves about things that I would like a certain way. But getting straight A's on everything and being a perfectionist, that I can't identify with that.
Yeah, I think I fall in your camp as well. I mean, in school, I would always find the smartest kid in the class that did their math homework and ask them if I could copy it so I could learn it, you know. And, I'm not opposed to that. I don't think of that in a negative connotation, but in a positive way, because if you find somebody smarter than you, right, that's already done it and you're trying to learn it, then ask them for help, right? Have them sit down with you for maybe eight minutes. And as you're, maybe, some people learn through copying, something else and then asking questions about it. So as long
Yeah.
as it's not cheating on a test and doing something dishonest, I think it's a amazing way of learning. Uh, but the second one, after the perfectionist, that I don't think either one of us fall into, is the self-saboteur. And that was given in this article, and then it went on to elaborate a little bit more on that. But we procrastinate, or that type does, by self-sabotaging themselves with self-criticism, and that they put off things because they somehow in their mindset have decided that uh, they are not good enough to do that, or it's just kind of a put off type of procrastination, and it really self sabotages themselves and their lives and all the people around them.
You know, Jim, I know you kind of alluded to maybe not feeling like either of us fit into that camp. And I would push back on that and resist that a little bit. Um, so my thoughts around that idea is that oftentimes there are deep-seated beliefs that we have been conditioned with, either in our upbringing or in our environment or through our schooling or through certain friendships, that we may not be fully aware of how much time we do actually dwell on negativity and how much time we do actually dwell on scarcity. Okay. So for myself, I grew up in an environment with two parents who I would very squarely put in the category of non-ambitious, right? Like still
Mhm.
working through their own challenges constantly having financial issues. And so there was this mentality that was in my environment of lack and limitation, as opposed to encouragement, support, step out, grow, develop, help. Right, not maybe not. That help was discouraged. Help was a thing, but it was more so of it was a common theme to use the phrase "we can't afford that," right? And
Hmm.
so for me, dwelling on those thoughts, maintaining those emotions that are connected to that is a form of self-sabotage, because
Hmm.
I had to grow out of, and still now I'm in the process of growing out of some of those old stale beliefs. And part of why we talk about, and why I talk about, how healthy it is to purge and offload some of those, self-defeating thinking and some of those labels and attachments that we've placed on ourselves, and remove some of those things because they're self-sabotaging in nature.
Hmm. I think if, like what we said in the last episode, or you said in the last episode, about just standing in front of the mirror and looking at yourself and really taking a self awareness evaluation
Mm-hmm.
of what you are right there at that particular moment. Not in the past, not where you're wanting to be 20 pounds lighter than now, but right now. I think that, um, you know, we all probably fit or can relate to this second category of self-sabotaging ourselves.
I think if
Because
we
some,
paid better attention, Jim, if we paid better attention to the critic in our own head, I think more people would align with that camp or put themselves in that camp of self-sabotage
uh-huh,
than they realize.
yeah. And then the third one, and then we can dive a little bit more into this, or jump to the other parts of the topic, or the adrenaline junkie. That's the third type, where they put it off until the last possible millisecond. And then they go on adrenaline and do things at the last minute. Now, if you're a firefighter or you work in the emergency room, that uh, that may be a good thing to have adrenaline and doing things very quickly and at the last minute, right? Because you need to save people's lives. They're in a 911 call. But
Sure.
you know, our lives should not be. No, I think that they are 911 calls all the time when we're talking about procrastination. And I do have a really great example of this that I'd like to share as well. But Jason, let's get your thoughts first, and then I'll jump back to my share on this particular uh, type of procrastinator, the adrenaline junkie.
Sure. So that's the area that I probably fit most in, um, because I was never thrilled. And I just, as you're mentioning that, I go naturally to like a school assignment or a project or something that, a longer thing that requires longer concentrated thought. And throughout my entire life, that's been a difficult thing to get me to focus on something without there being a collective effort, right? Without there being a partner, or without there being someone alongside me to sit there together. I think it's something that I've recently come to appreciate and understand about myself, that if two of us together choose to tackle a project and approach it right at the same time, and we go into it together, then my attention span is much, much better if we together are focused on this, as opposed to me trying to, within myself, get the willpower up, or get the focus together to go and do something that otherwise was not pleasurable, unless it was some type of physical challenge, right? Unless it was a run, unless it was a workout, unless it was something that was, involving the body, involving movement.
Uh huh. And maybe you know, the sporty part help with that as well because it gets all that energy out and moving, right? I
Sure.
noticed when I was in the classroom that I would use movement a lot, especially when I was teaching young people a subject of getting them up out of the seat and have them to like stand up and you know work on their posture and then move around different movements of whatever concept I was talking about, even if it was clapping and then giving a fist pump, right, on the particular concept I was teaching. And a lot of times, I think the whole classroom benefited, but especially that kind of adrenaline junkie that does procrastinate and does things at the last minute. They have a book report that I've told them, you have a month to do this, to read the book, and then I would break it down. This week you should be finishing the first part of the book. We're going to outline chapter 9, on Thursday this week. Let's get your book report going. But there were always a certain part that were procrastinating, and the night before they would drive their parents ape crazy. And, and then like they would say, "Dad, I have a book report due tomorrow." And they're like, "It's 7 o'clock at night. We just finished dinner, and you're telling me this, right? How long have you known that you had a book report? Weeks, And so I mean, they would get it done, and actually, they would get, an A on that particular assignment. But the stress involved with that and what they were learning by procrastinating that way probably wasn't the most healthy. And it probably was a message that, oh, I mean, Jason, we can all get away with it from time to time with adrenaline and getting things out the door. And I think that sometimes the stress is a good thing in our lives. Not too much, but it gets us off our can and gets things done. And if it's adrenaline, it's fine. But I think on this,
Well, Tim, real quick on that,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
you may or may not, but share with me if you're familiar with eustress versus distress. Are you familiar?
No, I'm not. But go ahead with the concept.
Sure. So the concept is distress is something that is you're either not prepared for or causes for you to spiral in a bit of a negative way, and you get overwhelmed, and it has a negative impact on the outcome, and it has a negative impact on the situation, and
Hmm.
you just don't meet the challenge. That's distress. Well, eustress is a more positive view of challenging the status quo, essentially, right? This idea of, in an uplifting, encouraging type of way, you want to
Hmm.
apply pressure to the system, but in a healthy way that causes the end result to be improved, because either the person was prepared for that stress or they responded to that stress in a healthy way as opposed to a negative way.
Uh-huh. An example of this, and I alluded to a little bit earlier on this adrenaline junkie, is I have a really great friend that procrastinates and falls square. He gets an A+ in this adrenaline junkie category.
Right.
And one example that just drives me crazy, I actually have anxiety over it, to be very open and vulnerable with everybody. And then I go to his house, and he never opens his mail. So all of his US mail is sitting all over his dining table in mounds over the years. And but it's never thrown away, but it is kind of thrown away because that's kind of his trash can. I can't even look at the clutter. It just gives me all kinds of like, oh, and but the one thing that he does do that is an ultimate procrastination is that he puts his income taxes off forever in filing his tax returns.
Hmm.
And that's where we're very different And that's a great example of this adrenaline junkie. And that in procrastinating, he's going to file his income tax returns. And a lot of them are with partnerships where the other person has already done the income tax corporate return and they're waiting on him to do the return. And then the adrenaline junkie procrastinating part is that he just keeps putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And then the adrenaline comes and the pressure and the stress and all that, starts accumulating. And uh,
Are you
it,
partners with him? Are you partners with this individual in any businesses?
I think that we all have those people in our lives, both in our personal and our business relationships. And most of us listening to this can probably point out, a handful of the people in our life experiences. But, this whole thing of procrastination and adrenaline junkie type of behavior, I think that eventually, it's going to have to be done, right? And it causes such what I view as extreme anxiety in your life. And so I'm the opposite. I open my mail over the trash can. So I don't have like a mal. I can't stand clutter. That's me,
Mhm.
right? So I'm the
Sure.
opposite. And also, I have like an income tax stuff for every part of our businesses, and the real estate part is complicated, right? Because there's expenses, there's rents, there's managing the property management company if you have one, there's cash flow, there's uh, what we call capex expenses, which means if you're owning a commercial property, then like it's the driveway, right? Well, we don't do the driveway every day or every month or every year, but we have a line item of it's going to cost maybe $67,000 to resurface this parking lot. So how are you going to come up with that kind of money, right? And so,
Sure.
um, those are things that um, are part of things that I put in line items quite frequently, almost like if not every week, then at least once a month. So by the end of the year, my return information to give our accounting department is all done. So it's very easy for me to then just give them the information, especially in today's world. I don't even have to show up in their office, and they do the tax return, and I have it all done by February 1st, and I don't even think about it anymore. And but I think that that works for me, and I think if I look at myself and are very aware that I could, you know, and in the past, especially when I was in junior high and high school, I was the adrenaline junkie. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
definitely. You know, I put things off to the last minute, and that type of behavior as an adult and an older adult just doesn't work for me.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I'm not here to criticize other people and the way that they do things in their life. I'm here, and I think that you are too, Jason, to help them maybe look at themselves, become self-aware of like, am I doing this? And then the third step is, if I am doing this, what corrective measures could I take to make a home run out of it?
Yeah, and I mean that's the name of the game, and we always get back to that thought in just about every episode: is how do we more honestly examine ourselves? How do we take whatever concept we're discussing at the time and truly and sincerely see how we apply that in our life or don't apply that in our life to enjoy a more peaceful, more free, more fulfilling work, life experience in every aspect of our life, right? How does that impact our finances? How does that impact our relationships? How does it impact the way we feel in our physical body? How does it impact the thoughts that we maintain when we're alone in silence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as we think through that, and as we further examine self, then you become more familiar with those areas where you might be missing the mark, right? You might be missing the mark in a drastic and severe way and haven't given any attention to it, or it might be just a subtle tweak. And so you don't know unless you observe, unless you look at it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the encouragement at the end of the day, to your point, not intending to be a critic, not intending to ridicule anyone, not intending to condemn anyone, but how does said concept, whatever it is, apply in my life?
Mm-hmm.
So there were some other thoughts. Is that the entirety of the article that you read that you wanted to cover today?
Yes, it was. I think that that probably, in a nutshell, gives three main types of procrastination, and then we kind of gave some examples on how that, and we kind of wrapped it up by encouraging people just to be self-aware, and where your focus goes, then your energy flows. And so I would encourage people to figure out which category they probably most fit into, and then and just work on that this week.
And as it that's a great suggestion, is identify, right? So look at your own situation, see how what category you fit in, and then go about asking just in a sincere way, ask, how might I stand to improve this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And shut up. And what's inevitably going to happen is some answer will come to mind, right?
Yeah.
Some answer will present itself to you, and you'll be surprised to realize that you had the answer the whole time. You just didn't realize that you were messing up, right? You didn't realize you were missing the mark. So
Mm-hmm.
as we're talking about this topic and procrastination and how it applies to just human behavior, I think it's important for us to realize that we all probably procrastinate in one way or another on a certain topic. And pointing back to what I often like to reference is, we are not going to change human behavior. But what we can do is we can leverage it and become familiar with it.
Yeah.
And so, as
That.
I think about an applicable law or an applicable remedy to this, is just to recognize that inertia is a physical law. For those of us that took physical science back in the day, whenever it was, fifth grade or whatever, physical science reminds us that inertia, the definition of inertia is a body at rest tends to stay at rest,
Mm-hmm.
and a body in motion tends to stay in motion. And so if we over time develop a pattern of sitting around and being lazy and procrastinating, then that type of behavior is going to tend to perpetuate, right? It's going to continue to happen. We're going to continue to stay in that pattern, as opposed to the person who, by luck, by chance, by intentional focus or whatever, tends to stay in motion, tends to stay proactive, tends to stay doing things and moving in a positive direction. Those individuals are going to accomplish so much more than someone who might be habitually stuck, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
referencing back to the 7 habits of a highly effective person from Dr. Stephen Covey back in the day, those of us that are old enough to remember that, kind of one of the OGs of personal development world,
Uh-huh.
being proactive is literally the number one effective habit. It's to be proactive. It's to be an initiator, right? To be, I think of it as being on your front foot, right? Instead of sitting on your heels, instead of waiting back, instead of letting things come to you, it's this idea of leaning forward and moving in the direction of whatever you ideally would like to participate in. But at the same time, I would also caution those that might be on that front foot. You also don't want to be so far on your front foot where you're falling all over yourself, right? There's
Hmm.
a fine line between leaning so heavily that you can't maintain the pace, right? That you can't maintain any kind of resemblance of balance or kind of intentional steps, that you're kind of falling and catching yourself. um, so sometimes that's the only way for us to get ourselves going, right? We have to tip our top over and our feet have to catch up. Or maybe another person might take a different approach where they take a little baby step and another little baby step and another little baby step. But as that domino hits the next one, it, it kind of gains momentum.
Yeah, I love that, Jason. And when we talk about emotion, the word, the E part of that is the energy. If you were to take just that first letter and
Yeah.
then energy and then motion, it creates that emotion. And
Energy and
that's something to
motion.
get
That's
pretty
good, Jim.
emotional about.
If I've ever heard that before, I forgot. So thank you for reminding me of that. That's a good one.
I don't know.
Energy.
Another Jimism, I'll just throw it out there that, I think that we all need to get the energy behind our motion, right? And the whole emotion part then will catapult us into maybe thinking little bit more clearly and more aware about ourselves and our procrastination of certain things in our lives, and just get our tail off the ground and do it, right? With good energy and good motion.
Like
So
that.
that's something to get emotional about.
Yeah. And recognizing that emotion is healthy, right? It's healthy to be emotional. Allow for those type of that type of energy that wells up within you. Allow it to flow freely, but don't dwell on that emotion, right? Don't stay stagnant in it. Don't stay attached to it in an unhealthy way where you start carrying those emotions into your next conversation, or carrying those emotions into the next environment where they may not apply, right?
Hmm.
They may not apply the same way. So our opportunity is to develop some semblance of control, that we attempt to be fully present in every new environment, right? Every new environment is an opportunity for us to be be there, be available, be present.
Awesome. I think that wraps it up for today. We've covered the topic very well. And Jason, you came to the plate again and hit it out of the ballpark.
Well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate you, my man. You know how much love and just gratitude I have for this connection and for us committing to doing this. And so hopefully, if there's anyone out there that would like to have further conversation or deeper conversation on this subject or any of the other ones, you can reach either one of us, through show notes or however you found us. We're available on social. But go and like and follow and subscribe to the YouTube channel, as well as download it on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And we look forward to connecting with y'all. Until we see y'all again. Love y'all. Peace.
Peace.